Excuse me. Afternoon all. Growing up as a child in the 70s, as one might imagine, as far as comics go, as it is now, it was then, with the big two being the main comic book companies. Of course, I'm talking about Marvel and DC. And maybe about 3 or 4 years later, because my introduction was probably around 73, around 76, 77, I started finding out about books like Heavy Metal magazine. They had a compilation of various artists and writers' stories in them, and of course they were leaning towards a more mature audience, dealing with, in many cases, graphic violence and overt sexuality. By all rights, I was of an age that really shouldn't have been reading those comics, but there wasn't anybody at the stores at the time that were gonna, card you, or even with your parents, if they see a colorful cover that's not really showing what the interiors are about, they're not going to police you at all either. So anyway, I got away with checking out a number of materials that were probably questionable for someone 9, 10, 11, 12 to be looking at. Now, as an adult, I've never been shy about purchasing comics that dealt with a more adult themed issues, and whether it was violent, sexual, or just something, cerebral. Now, a lot of stuff outside of Marvel and DC that I've seen through the years, most lately in the last 10, 12 years or so, things like Absolution, Black Kiss, Black Summer, some of the later issues of Heavy Metal, Sally Forth, Little Annie Fanny, that was in the comic section of Playboy magazine, and what have you. I was down for it. If the story was good and the art was good, it was all good to me. But here we are in 2011, and the topic comes up from time to time: are comics too sexually suggestive, and are they too violent for the youth market today? I think you'd have to define the word "too." Of course, I'm speaking as an adult, but a child, I guess there should be some things done within the industry. If you're a mainstream company, pardon the car going by. If you're a mainstream company, that you should be concerned with. It's been a long time since there was the Comics Code of Authority. Now, I don't know how much enforcing they did, when they were official. But certainly, without there being a Comics Code of Authority, it does seem to be that there's a little more, or a lot more, that goes. My growing up with comics, I would say it was probably around the mid to late 80s that I noticed a shift. And the way I'm seeing it, and I'm sure there's probably stuff that happened before, but as I remember it, visually, one of the things that I saw different was the cut of some superheroines' costumes. And the one that stands out in my mind may not be the first costume, but the one that stands out in my mind is Psylocke. Usually when a superheroine wore something where you could clearly see that she didn't have that much on her legs, that she had basically bare legs, although they may have been covered by high boots, thigh-high boots or whatever. The cut of the, we'll call it bikini, the bikini bottom was fairly modest. Well, somewhere along the mid to late 80s, Jim Lee got on board with the X-Men, and his Psylocke, the cut of her costume was demonstratively different from superheroines prior to his Psylocke. At the side, the hip region, the cut was quite high, so that from the back you could basically see, for want of a better term, cheek. You know, and usually prior to that you wouldn't see cheek, or it would be almost infinitesimally noticeable. But with Jim Lee, it was extremely accessible. It was, just shy of being what could be considered a thong. And then around that time, maybe a little bit before, maybe a little bit after, you had the death of Elektra by Frank Miller, in which case one of the sides which she uses as a weapon, the knife deal, was clearly depicted on the cover, is Bullseye is Bullseye shoving this side through Elektra's chest, with it exiting her back. And I think Marvel's editors probably pulled what I imagine was the original image. I can't prove it, but I'm just guessing, Frank Miller being Frank Miller, that originally the blade probably came through, and maybe there was an indication of blood. Now what ended up happening was the cover that people know about, you basically see the side go through, but as a result, instead of it going through the back of her costume, it basically just pushes the back of her costume out. And to me, it makes for even a more brutal image than had you actually seen the blade. But anyway, with those two incidents of sensuality and violence, comics really haven't looked back since then. So the question becomes, if you're trying to, as a comic book company, a mainstream comic book company, to appeal to an all ages core, because I don't know, you can argue whether or not it was ever purely just for kids, but if you're trying to appeal to an all ages group, what's the thing that should be done? Now, both Marvel and DC, I believe they both have that whole ratings deal, M for mature, and whatever 17 and G general audience or the equivalent thereof. But a kid that's looking at two different books related to Batman, and one book is Batman just routinely taking down the criminal of the day, but the other Batman is a Batman where something suggestive is going on. All the kid recognizes is that that's a Batman title, and he's not going to say, "Oh, well, look, there's an adult situation. I think I'm going to bypass this and go for what obviously is intended for me." Well, of course, things don't work like that. The kid's going to grab whichever cover that he feels or she feels is the more attractive of the two. And if it just so happens to be the more risque cover or the more over-the-top violent cover, so be it. Now, I don't proclaim to have any answers for this kind of situation here, but what I would like to see, happen is for the companies to get together in some way with retailers to make sure that the comics that are not supposed to be read by a certain demographic don't end up in the hands of that demographic. And while you can't police anything 100%, you can take steps forward to help make things not so readily available for a youth market that comics are not intended for. One thought that I had would be bagging the comics that are of a mature nature, not typical comic book bags where you can just take the flap and tape them down, but bags that are sealed all the way around. Now that can be a disservice to the person of age that can that wants to look inside to see whether or not his or her money is being well spent. But as far as something like that goes, I would say having something along the lines of a series of Kindle/kiosks within a store, so that a person can electronically see whether or not whether a comic is worth their time. If the person's fairly youthful, you card them, making sure they're the right age, and then you take it from there to see what you have to hone, to see what you have to tweak, to see what you have to fine tune to make it even a better system for everybody. I'm doing this as part of a TagTeam POV with my friend Edward2962, and whatever he has to say on the subject, I hope that you ask him questions based on how he feels, as well as ask me questions, or tell me what you agree with or disagree with on this video that I've made. But anyway, until next time, thank you for your time, and night out.